In today's video, I want to talk about finding work if you're over the age of 50. My name is Bill Benoist. I'm a certified professional career coach here in Silicon Valley, and this is what I'm all about. I'm primarily working with people in mid to late career, and I would say my typical client is right around 55 years old. So, I do feel that I know what I'm talking about because this has been my niche since 2012. So let's talk about this. There is age discrimination out there. There's no doubt about it. But it's going to start with your resume. Does this make sense? I mean, if the resume is one of the first things that somebody sees, then you need to age-proof your resume. So let me give you a couple of bits of information. Number one, you do not need to go back more than 10, definitely no more than 15 years on a resume as far as dates go. Now, this also includes your education. You don't want to be putting the years that you graduated on your education, but also the early jobs out there. If I'm a hiring manager and I receive a resume and on page 2, we're going back into the 1985, 1979, whatever it is, well, obviously, I know that you are an older worker, and some of these positions may not even be relevant anymore for the day. But let's say there are some positions out there that have relevancy, that were older positions. For example, although I've been in technology for the last 20 years, before that, I was actually a branch manager of savings and loans. Remember that era? And one of the savings and loans that I managed was a $21.5 million asset base. So I can actually have that on my resume, but here's the key. I'm putting it under a new heading called additional work experience. I'm not putting a lot of information on that, just maybe 1 or 2 sentences, and I'm not putting a date with any of the positions that I held under that area, additional work experience. So another good thing about this is, although I had a lot of jobs 15 years ago, I'm only listing a couple of them, and because I'm not using any dates, it doesn't show that I'm a job hopper. So that's the first thing. You need to age-proof your resume. Now here's the second key, and that is you need to have curiosity. You need to be on this constant learning path. I think I've talked about this in past videos, that there is a very large empirical study that was done where they asked a number of HR professionals and hiring managers. They didn't really talk to recruiters about this, but they asked these hiring managers and HR professionals, what is your number one perception, negative perception of the older worker? And there was a lot of answers that rose to the top that were number one. But then what they did is they really did some digging down into the data, and they found there was a top 5 that kept coming up. And these were the top 5. Number 1, older worker would have no drive or energy to do the work. Number 2, the older worker would have difficulty working with a younger manager. Number 3, the older worker was not open to change. Number 4, the older worker was not open to learning new things, new skills, going to training. And number 5, the older worker would be more prone to illnesses. Now, think about this for a second. A resume is not going to show any of this, right? Because if you have hidden your age and now you're going into the interview, they have no idea that you might be an older worker, and you can put so much of this to rest. But I want to share something else with you that I think is even more important, and that is they ask these same individuals to look at their internal workforce and validate their answers. And you know what? They could only come up with one item, and that was the older worker was not open to learning new things, new skills, training. So I really encourage my clients who are over 50 to really start developing that curiosity. For example, can you talk about what cloud technology is? Can you talk about what AI is? Can you talk about any of the recent trends that are out there in the workforce? Just be able to have, discussions about this. I know so many people that don't. If you are a blue collar worker, can you work with Microsoft Office Suite? Do you understand how to work with Outlook, with Word, with, Excel? You don't have to be writing pivot tables or anything, but, can you work a simple Excel spreadsheet? These are all things that can really help you out. And there's so much online training out there. I mean, there's LinkedIn Learning, there's Udemy, there's Coursera. There is so much information out there, including just YouTube channels on how to do something, that there's really no excuse for anyone to not be able to stay up with technology and what's happening out there in the workforce. So you need to be curious, okay? You always need to be kind of curious. And this is something like what I'll do is I'll, be talking with somebody and say, I gotta look that up. And I'll actually bring up my notes app on my phone, and I'll just make a note of it. And when I get home, I'll just do a little bit of studying on that. So again, be curious. Number 3, and that is social media itself. You need to not only have a LinkedIn profile that works for you. And by the way, I do have an online course, I'll link it in the notes section below, that goes over the resume and LinkedIn and job search strategies and interviewing and all this. But LinkedIn, what we're talking about right now is that you need to have a LinkedIn profile that looks good. And one of the easiest things that you can do that will actually show your tech savvy is by just simply customizing your LinkedIn URL. And I'll go ahead and link to a video in the upper right hand corner as just how to do that. I mean, it literally takes 90 seconds to customize your LinkedIn URL, but it's going to look so much cleaner with this. And again, that's going to show that you're a little bit tech savvy out there. So if you don't have a LinkedIn profile and you don't have, or maybe you do, but you're not using it or anything, you really need to get on the ball with this. And the fourth thing is just simply attitude. Back in 2018, I created a video on why older workers are not being hired, and I'll link to that one as well. And that video gathered a lot of attention over the last couple of years. I think there's like about 50,000 views on it, and about 300 comments. But when you dig down into some of these comments, and I'm only talking about maybe 5%, 10% of them, but some of these comments are really negative towards the younger worker. It's like, oh, well, the younger worker, the younger manager, they don't know what they're doing. All of this negativity. So something else that I share with my clients, and something I think is really super important that older workers really embrace, and that is when you're going into the interview, I want you to think of these 4 things, what I call this mantra, and that is number 1, you are a professional. Number 2, you are not going to have any problems. Number 3, you're not going to create any problems. And number 4, you're there to solve all of their problems. So walking away from this video, something that I really want you to understand is that the age discrimination often starts with a perception. It starts with the resume. You age-proof your resume, you're going into the interview, you're going in energetic, you're going in with confidence. Really, if you're interviewing with a younger manager, it's probably not even going to be really a relevant issue if you're older than them. I'm saying this from experience. I mean, I have interviewed and hired a number of older workers out there. But if you are coming in with a chip on your shoulder, you're coming in not energetic, you're moseying around, you're not dressed professionally. In other words, you're not a professional. You start bad talking prior companies. I can tell that you have a bad attitude. I know you're going to create problems. You're probably coming in with some problems, and I don't think you're going to be able to solve all my problems. In those cases, I wouldn't hire the individual.